Well, good morning. Sorry it's so loud. As I keep talking, he'll adjust all the sound things. I'm really glad that you're here, and it's my job to break up all the fun you were just having talking to your neighbor, and so I've successfully accomplished that goal. Good to see you. I'm Lynn Snodgrass, the CEO of the best darn chamber in the Pacific Northwest, bar none, and you are why, because I have a wonderful group of members, we have a wonderful community, and I like my job. And sometimes if you like your job, you do it pretty well. So I'm still working on the doing it pretty well part. So I want to thank you for coming today. And I also want to thank our presenting sponsors. We cannot do this. We could not offer these kinds of opportunities to you without presenting sponsors. So Columbia Bank is one of our presenting sponsors, and they have also supplied notebook paper and pens. So as our speaker is talking today, if you'd like to write down some questions so you remember to ask, then you could do that. The Boeing Company is also a sponsor, and we've got Amy with us today. Amy, thank you for coming today. I think this might be her inaugural Business and Leaders Luncheon. So Boeing, thank you very much, Amy, for coming. Portland General Electric also has a place on the board, and Andrew Spear is here he's our board member, but Andrew Spear with Portland General Electric, and Persimmon Country Club. And I want to take this time right now while they're here. Oh, she's not here. Okay, she's downstairs, so I want you to applaud Persimmon so that she downstairs can hear how hard and how much you like it. So could we do that so that she can hear? Thank you. Will you pass that on to as well? As with most of our companies, our staff are not as high levels as they have been in the past, and Persimmon is no different. So it's amazing they could get all of this done for us at such a short time with so few people. I'd also like to thank our stakeholder sponsor, whoever phone that is. It's costing you $1. It rings again, it's $5. Mike Ash, we take credit cards, so there we go. Our stakeholder sponsor is Gresham Barlow School District, and our media sponsor, thank you very much, Keith, for providing this, is Metro East Community Media. And we are recording the presentation today, and it's going to be rebroadcast, and these are on the desk as you go out. So pick up one of these, and if you didn't hear everything or if you missed something, you can listen to it again or give it to your neighbors and friends. The next rebroadcast is Friday the 26th at 7 o'clock. So thank you, Metro East Community Media. I'd like to acknowledge the board members that we have with us today. I already mentioned Andrew Spear from PGE. Thank you, Andrew. And Kayla Viramontes of the Bold Orange is with us today, too. She probably won't be here next month because the baby's due in 5 weeks. So we're hoping that baby comes early. So thank you very much, Kayla. We have elected officials in the audience with us today, too, on the city level. I'd like to introduce Sue Piazza, Councilor Sue Piazza. Sue, thank you for being here. And Councilor Janine Gladfelter. There you go, Councilor Janine Gladfelter. Every 4 years, we elect councilors. Every other, 2 years ago, now this year. So Janine's running for re-election. Are you running for re-election? Maybe I shouldn't. Okay, there we go. Open mouth, insert foot, could have been that. All right, so I brought something today that I'm kind of proud of. It's called our newsletter. And if you are not signed up for our newsletter, you're missing a lot, especially today. The seeds to grow today is the price, the message is, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And that's from Warren Buffett. But if you read the newsletter today, you'll see that we are also honoring Shane Bemis, our former mayor. And it's because he's turning 50 this weekend. And if those of you that have turned 50 know, it's devastating. It's like there's no turning back. And so what we've done is we've given snapshots of Shane, and we've got comments from the community leaders and friends so we came up with 50 words to celebrate his 50th birthday. So anyway, we do fun things like that to celebrate. We notify you of things that are coming up in a fun way, but usually through pictures. But read the captions, because that'll be the explanation. Okay, given all of that, one last thing. I'm going to give you my dishwasher wrap-up. It came, it's installed, it works, it's done. So where we go. I know it's almost a full year, 2 weeks and it'll be a full year. No fault of anybody's. Well, a little fault of one person, but that's another story, another day. Our guest speaker today is the city manager of Gresham, and that's why all of you came. Didn't come to listen to me, you came to listen to her. Her job as city manager is to manage staff and finances of the entire city government. She reached out to me to speak to us as she wants to bring us up to date on what the city is embarking on. She will talk about the strategic plan, perhaps the Imagine Gresham results, the safety issue of Gresham, and the city's financial plan. Lots of information, thus the pieces of paper and pens in front of you if you want to jot things down and to help remember. And of course, as always, there will be time for questions after her presentation. So, with that being said, I want to welcome back to stage, because she's been here before, and she asked to come back, so you must have been good. That was a good thing. I'd like to introduce our city manager, Nina Vetter.
Well, thank you for having me back. I thought I was invited back because I failed to bring pictures of my cute cat last time, but I failed to add that to my presentation again today. So just means I'll have to come back a third time now. So we'll see you again soon. Thank you for letting me be your presenter today for your beautiful lunch. As Lynn said, I'm the city manager responsible for what happens day to day. Report to all 7 council members, including our mayor, who set the policy and vision for where our city is going. So you have to bear with me today. I did think it would be a good idea to run through a lot of what's happening at the city across multiple areas. If you don't know, we have 600 employees who work at the city. We do everything from police and fire to wastewater, water, sewer, community development, homeless services, economic development, code enforcement, planning. The list goes on. We do a lot as a city organization, and a lot of the work that we do, all of the work we do actually, impacts our community. And so today I thought I would spend some time talking about some of the topics like planning that you might not hear about very often, but actually impact you directly, so that you know what's happening. So hopefully I won't bore you to sleep today, but we shall see. So I'm going to start with an update of both our strategic plan and our financial plan. And last time I was here, I touched on both of these projects, so I'll just do a quick overview. Over the last year, our city organization has been working to develop a long-term vision for Gresham. In the past, we have historically been relying on a one-year plan that council approves that lists priorities and our projects. We haven't had a long-term plan for a long time, and it's really important that we have one so that we know how to focus our day-to-day work. All the work we do across our 600 employees should be supporting, right? The vision of where we're trying to go as a community should be supporting those strategic goals. We heard a lot from our community. I know many of you participated, so thank you to those who did. We did a lot of different outreach for this plan, different than we've done in the past. So we tried new things. We actually went to schools and heard from kids about what's important for them, for a community where they want to stay and grow up. So it was exciting to get a different perspective than we're used to hearing. So it was great community outreach and really informed by our council, who held a retreat this past spring to formalize what our goals and our vision look like for Gresham. This evening at our city council meeting, it's a fun long day for a few of us, we will be looking for adoption of this document. You can find it on our website if you want to see more. Again, it lays out what is the vision of Gresham, what are our key goals, and how are we going to measure success. It's really important that we are accountable to you all, the people we serve. So we will be reporting back to you all on how we're succeeding in implementing the goals in our strategic plan, where we're falling short, where we're failing, and how we're going to adjust to make sure that we're successful in the future. So you will see success measures or performance measures in the future that will help hopefully all of you in our community better understand where we're going as a city, where do we stand today, and what we need to improve on. So you don't have to rely on me showing up to your luncheon to give you the updates. You'll be able to find that information on the website, and it'll be updated regularly. So we're excited to move in that direction to have more transparency and accountability for our city. In partnership with our strategic plan is our financial roadmap. As we've talked about before, our city has been underfunded for decades. We've continued to do more with less. As we've maintained a similar level of staff, our community has grown significantly, and the demands for services have grown significantly. An example is we recently, over the last few years, added a homelessness services team, which we had never had before. So it's really important that we have the resources we need as a city to continue to provide you all, the community, with the services that you're asking for and to support those big, exciting dreams and goals that you have in our strategic plan. So our financial roadmap that, again, we will be discussing tonight at City Council outlines options for funding over the next 3 years. When it comes to options for funding, because the next question I get is like, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? We have a few. I will say many of the tools that we have available do require voter support. Examples include operating levies, bonds, districts. Those would be voter-approved measures. There are also some tools to financial sustainability that our council has that they can implement. One that you might be familiar with right now is a fee. There's different types of fees. In order for us to ensure that we can implement all of our goals, continue to provide services, we're going to need to use a lot of tools. So one thing alone, one levy, one fee won't solve our problem. We will be implementing multiple tools to ensure that we have long-term financial sustainability, and that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. After tonight, and over the next few months, as council considers a ballot initiative, we will be circling back to the community to talk about what that looks like and how you can get engaged in the process. Because like I said, it's going to require voter support. We are a very large community with a diverse voting base, and so it's important that we're doing outreach and engagement so that we have the support we need to be successful in a ballot initiative. Again, you'll be able to find the financial roadmap on our website, and we will be following back up so that you can get engaged in this important process as we move forward. But these two plans together, while they may sound a little, maybe not the most exciting thing on the face of it, really are foundational to the future of our community. If we don't have a plan for where we're going, and if we don't have the resources to get there, we are not going to be successful long term. We want to make sure that we can continue to provide you with the great services that you have today and expand and invest even more to address the concerns that you're hearing and that you see as community members. And if we don't have these two important documents, we won't be successful in doing that. So we're really excited about adoption of these two important plans and documents because they really do lay the foundation for the future of Gresham to put us on a sustainable path. Okay, well, let's talk about safety. I think last time I was here, I touched on our Safe Gresham initiative. If you weren't here, I want a refresher. About 8 months ago, we started what's called the Safe Gresham Initiative. Obviously, as you all have seen, experienced, or maybe heard, we have had an increase in crime and violence in our community over the last few years, and we need to address it. And that's in partnership with not having enough funding or enough staff, including in our police department. And those two issues coming together have been very, very challenging for us. So Safe Gresham is our community violence and crime prevention initiative. And you can find more information on the bottom here. If you go to the website, you can see exactly what initiatives fall under Safe Gresham, and you can see what progress and successes we have had since we've started the initiative. But what this initiative recognizes is that there's 3 stools to preventing future community crime and violence. It's prevention up front, it's intervention, and collaboration. So those are the 3 legs of the stool to make sure that we can prevent further crime and violence in our community. And prevention plays an incredibly important role. What we've seen in the last few years is a dramatic increase in violence amongst youth. And when we think youth, you might not be thinking this young, but yes, this young, 13 and 14-year-olds participating in gun violence. So there is such a big need for us to invest in our youth, who are often the perpetrators and also, unfortunately, also the victims of much of the violence that we're seeing in our community. In the past, we have not, as a city, had investment into youth violence prevention programs or resources. We cut back on youth recreation programs many years ago following the last recession. So, fortunately, our council has stepped in over the last year, and we received a $2 million grant from the state thanks to the work of our city council and lobbying for that has now been stood up. And they do incredibly important work in prevention. They're the ones in the field day to day working with youth who are at risk. They are providing positive social opportunities, mentoring, and also, in the next stool, intervention. Our team also plays a very important role in intervention. When we talk about the violence that we're seeing, and a lot of it is street gang related violence, one of the biggest then repercussions of that is we see retaliatory violence that comes out of that. And our youth violence prevention team has actually played a role in the last few months in preventing further violence. And that's because they are working with those youth and they're working with the organizations that they're most connected with. Right? We're not all connected individually with the groups and resources that these youth engage with on a daily basis, but our team is. They're out there working with the groups, connecting with youth who are at risk, who potentially could be the next victim or potentially be the next one who's participating in gun violence. So they've been doing incredible work over the last few years. Our city council will be hearing an update from them in September about some of the successes that they're having. That all being said, there's so much more work to do, right? This group is just gotten started. Fortunately, our council has funded it, but it is new, so it's getting up and rolling. There's much more work to do, but the first step was this investment in making sure that we are investing in preventing violence in the future in our community. Again, the next leg of our program is about intervention. I mentioned this involves our youth violence prevention team, and this also involves our law enforcement. Our law enforcement plays an incredibly important role in intervention as well. We fortunately have great relationships with other law enforcement agencies because we as a city can't do it alone. We work in an ecosystem, right? So we work with the FBI, we work with Multnomah County Sheriff's Office to share intel, information. We're now participating in NIBIN, which is the national database for ballistics, so that we can trace each and every shell casing that we get to trace what other violence that gun may have been involved in the past. We haven't done these things in the past. So all these partnerships that we've established over the last few years in collaboration has improved our ability to identify what happened, identify who may have been involved, and help prevent the next incident from happening. And the third leg of our Safe Gresham stool is collaboration, and this is really with the community. We want to make sure that you all know what we're doing, but obviously that we're working with you all on community safety, because each and every one of you also plays an important role in community safety. Are any of you part of your neighborhood associations by any chance? A few of you? Yeah. That's a great resource for you. It is important to be connected with your neighborhood, with your neighbors, with your community, to ensure that you have local safety in your neighborhoods. And so I encourage you to reach out to either your neighborhood association or to your neighbors and make sure that you're establishing your own network as well. We also, in collaboration, think it's incredibly important that we have good, trusting relationships with the community, right? We want people to feel like they can call our law enforcement and that they're there to help. So what we've seen recently, unfortunately, is some people have stopped calling the police because they think we're so busy, or they think that it's not important enough. It's not an important enough issue to call the police. We will always encourage you, if you're witnessing a crime, please call the police. We can't do anything about the issue if we don't know about it. And we do track issues as well. So even if the issue maybe doesn't get resolved in that moment, we still need to have that report and the information about what happened, because it could help us in the future. So please continue to call. I will make a side note. I know one of the frustrations we continue to hear, not just in Gresham, but in all of Multnomah County, is a frustration when you call 911 or maybe non-emergency and you're on hold for a while. Has anyone experienced that? Yes. That is the BOEC, Bureau of Emergency Communication, and they're part of the city of Portland. We do not have our own dispatch center at the city. We are reliant on that. We pay them to serve as our dispatch center. And what's interesting is the wait times, particularly for non-emergency calls, has actually been that long for many, many years, but they hadn't seen the demand that they're seeing now. So BOEC is trying really hard to increase their staffing, but it's also hard because we have no control or ownership of that issue, unfortunately. We're trying to work with them, and us and our mayor lobby on a regular basis to get those issues addressed at BOEC, but that really is a City of Portland issue. Also in safety, it's important, while law enforcement plays an important role in safety, so does fire and emergency services. And we're currently in the process of doing what we call a fire standards of cover, which is a very local government term. But essentially it is a report that will tell us what we need as a fire department in order to best serve the community and what kind of response times our standard is going to be. So that work is almost done. It will be going to City Council for adoption once it's complete. And that will help us identify where and what kind of investments we should be making in our fire department in the future. Do we have fire stations in the wrong area? Do they need to be upgraded? Do we need more staff here or more staff there? All of those things will be answered in this report, which will help us ensure that we have more strategic resources for fire and emergency response in the future. And last but not least, it's important to mention that our City Council has invested over $5 million in public safety from the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which are the federal funds that went to cities, in the last year. And it's really important. These funds have been crucial in adding staffing to both police and fire, and also adding staffing to our homelessness services team. So thank you to our City Council for recognizing the issues that we're facing and using these funds. I'll also say we're using these funds as a one-time gap, right, to fill the need. We will still need that long-term financial roadmap. We need long-term financial funding in order to maintain all these great investments that our City Council has just made. We need to be able to ensure that we have that long-term. Okay, let's move on to homelessness and housing support. One question I get pretty frequently is, or some people assume that we don't have a homeless team because we had put the NET team on pause. So we had a collaborative team that was composed of a few folks from our police department with our homelessness services team, which is not out of the police department. They used to work together, and code enforcement as well. And due to shortage of staffing in the police department, we put that program on pause. However, we still do have our entire homeless services team, and council funded the addition of another person. So we actually expanded our homeless services team in the last year because we have had an increase in the number of people in our community experiencing homelessness. So you'll see here on this slide a really great, just a little picture. It's a really great program that speaks to the creativity of our staff. So we were having trouble hiring for seasonal workers in our public works area, and we decided, when we're interacting with people who are experiencing homelessness, who don't have a job, this might be an opportunity to connect them to a resource. And we were able to we did a pilot program. We've never done this before. We were able to place one person who was experiencing homelessness in Gresham into a position in our organization. So thanks to our staff for coming up with that creative idea that we will expand and use next year as well. I do want to talk about housing, and it crosses over into planning a little bit because I really think it's important. There are several state mandates that either have come down or are coming down in the next few years that impact local communities. And there's two in particular I'll touch on today. Has anybody heard of middle housing? We got a few, yeah. I know Sue does. So middle housing was passed by the state, and it is an initiative to allow, I'm gonna try to get them all right because sometimes I forget, duplex, triplex, quadplex, and cottage clusters, I think I got that right, in single family zoning. And the idea is to have middle housing, right? So we have a lot of large single family lots, and then you have multifamily, like apartments. So the idea from the state is to try to have more middle housing. It gave us a little bit of flexibility as a city into how we implement, but at the end of the day, just that alone, the allowing of those certain uses, we could not do anything with. Council had no purview over that. That was mandated by the state. Now I bring it up because it will impact our community, and I get asked a lot, okay, so what's gonna happen, right? If this is gonna be allowed, we all are gonna do this across the state, what is the impact? The reality is we don't know. We don't know what this is gonna look like because it's new. We haven't seen other states implement something quite like this, so we're unsure what to expect. We don't expect like a flood of new duplex, triplex, quadplex, cottage clusters overnight. We don't think that's going to happen. We do see it kind of happening potentially incrementally, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see. It's hard to know what it's going to look like. The other important regulation is called CFEC, Climate Friendly Equitable Communities. Has anyone heard of that one? That's a mouthful. Yeah, of course. Oh, and I failed to mention, the other reason I bring up, I wanted to bring up these two initiatives is implementing these takes a significant amount of staff time, as you can imagine. So it just further goes to show when we're looking at long-term sustainable funding, we're talking about staff resources, our planning staff, by and large, are spending most of their day working on implementing state mandates that have mandated timelines so that we don't get fined. Okay, so CFEC, Climate Friendly Equitable Communities, was a rule passed down by the governor a few months ago. And it's pretty broad and sweeping regulation with regards to land use. It has some specific regulations about parking, particularly not local communities not being allowed to require certain amounts of parking. And so we are still working through, I forget how, I want to say it's like 400 pages. It's a very long document for CFEC. We're still working through what that looks like. And actually tonight, our city council will be hearing an update from our staff on our first reading of how this is going to affect our community. So more information to come. This is really important. This will impact Gresham. We're going to be doing a lot of work. Council's going to be hearing about this a lot over the next 6 months because we want to make sure that we understand it, that we're doing what we can. If there's any room to make it customizable to Gresham, we will try to do that, but we don't know how much room we have. But we know that it will force us to address parking, which in some ways we know is an issue in areas like downtown. So it will force us to address parking in a new way than we've ever done before. So stay tuned for a lot more information on this really important mandate. I will note, as an aside, that there's a lot of legal challenges to this. And of course, you never know if the next governor might undo it. So there's also that too. But until anything happens to change it, we have a deadline to meet January 1st of next year. And so we will do our best work as staff to implement it. And last but not least on this slide, I'm getting there. I know this is a lot, but it's good information. Last but not least is our housing production strategy, which also you could probably guess is a state mandate. Okay, no one wants to say it with me. All right. It's also state mandated that we have a housing production strategy. And a housing production strategy does an analysis of what housing you have available in your community, what housing you need to meet the needs, and then how are you going to fill in that gap, right? Where are you today, where you need to be, how do you fill in the gap? So we're currently in the midst of our housing production strategy, and the goal is ultimately for housing, to have housing for all, right? We want people, whether you're a new family or you're a senior trying to downsize, it's important that our community has housing options for all. So our housing production strategy should help ensure that we're moving in that direction to just have a diverse range of housing types and housing affordability across the spectrum. Okay, one more area, then I'll take questions. Another area of focus over the last few years has been parks and recreation. And we know how much our community loves our beautiful parks and our trails, and our staff does a phenomenal job maintaining them. We also have had a lot of investments in our parks over the last few years, including the purchase of our Shaw property. Thanks to council again for that. What we haven't had, like I mentioned, what got cut several years ago with the recession is recreation. And that's something that's been seriously lacking, obviously has a direct tie to youth services and to our youth violence prevention program. And so council decided to stand up a Parks and Rec Community Advisory Committee. I missed a few words there. And they are nearing the end of their work. We have 30 people on the committee who represent different areas, different perspectives, from business owners to school districts, to local park enthusiasts. We have a wide range group of people involved, and there we're tasked with identifying what resources we do have in our community today, what assets. For example, the programming that's available at Boys and Girls Club is an example, and then recommendations on how to move forward. So they will be presenting their findings over the next few months to our city council that will help inform what our parks and recreation looks like in the future for the city of Gresham. Okay, last but not, this is the last slide. Whew, we made it, team. Okay. I think I'm funny, but no one else does. At least Councilor Gladfelter laughs. We just created this graphic because we have a lot going on at the city, right? I just went through a whole lot of stuff, and it's like, if you don't work in local government, you're like, how do all these things relate to each other? What are you doing? So at the very top, our goal, right, our job, is to realize our vision for Gresham, realize the vision that our council has adopted for Gresham. Right below the top, Gresham's future, is the strategic plan and the financial roadmap. Because again, if we don't know where we're going and we don't have the resources to get there, we're not going to realize our vision. And then a level below that is what we call our 3-year operational plans. So like I'm sure many businesses have a business plan, all of our departments, whether you're at the housing department or planning department, all of them have a 3-year operational plan where they identify what their goals are and what staffing needs they have in order to accomplish those goals. And under there, you'll see, as I mentioned, the fire standards of cover and also the police organizational assessment review, which will be presented tonight. There's a lot of studies that the city does with outside consultants that help provide a different perspective on how we could be doing things differently and better. On the other side of this graphic, you'll see our annual city budget, which is really, I always say, the budget is a statement of priorities, right? Where we spend our money is what we think is most important. So if you look at our general fund budget as it stands today, 90% of it goes to public safety. Under the budget, we have daily operations and critical needs, right? A lot of the issues we're facing and investments we need to make and then daily operational needs that we have get funneled up into our budget process. I'll close out by saying, geez, we have a great staff. I mean, the amount of work that they do with what they have is truly amazing. They literally keep the city running. I got to spend some time in the last 2 weeks out with our wastewater team and our stormwater team, and they even let me like push some of the buttons. But they do incredible work day to day. A lot of it is smelly. A lot of it is difficult, and they have a lot more work than they do have time. And so I'm very thankful for our city staff who does a phenomenal job every day to serve our community. So that's what's new at Gresham. As always, if you ever want to chat with me, feel free to reach out. My door's always open. Thank you all for the time and the floor today to talk about all the things Gresham.
Thank you, Nina. Nina, sorry. On our board, we have 2 women who spell their name the same, N-I-N-A. One says Nina, the other says Nina. So I've introduced the board member, and our speaker today is Nina. Better, thank you. And I also want to introduce this board member who came late, and he's blaming his beautiful wife for that. But Warner Allen is here as well as a board member. So you would never blame, okay. And I also want to, for all of you that like things straight and angled, I apologize for the crooked sign this whole time. I wanted to go up there and change it, but no, you can't see it. It's in front of you, and that's why we didn't come up and realign it. It was crooked. So now it's time for questions. Little comedy relief. John, you've got a question. I'll work my way over there.
Good. I want to go now.
No, just a minute.
You gotta get the
We've got to
microphone.
get it recorded. We've got to get it recorded. Here we go.
This is a question, a general macro question about this particular slide.
Sure.
So you talk about plan, and of course we've all done business plans or
Yeah.
worked with business plans. A lot of times, it's interesting to understand how that's put together, right? So are you creating the plan of this is where we want to be, and we'll find the money to make that happen? Or this is what the money we have, and this is what we can do with that money to get closer to where we want to be. If you could give like a kind of understanding of how that's coming together, where you have these pieces of the puzzle, or you don't, and you want to get to this location, and how do you get there?
Thank you, John.
Ooh, good question. I love this because I get to nerd out about what we're doing every day. So yes. Okay. So every department is responsible for putting together these 3-year operational plans. And what we asked them to do is, first they developed what are our business lines within each department, right? So identifying what each business line is, what services do they provide, and then allocating staff time and resources to each one of those business lines, because that helps us identify how much is it costing us. And then also if we receive revenue, like let's say a planning fee, right? That's for a specific application. What kind of revenue also goes into that business line? And then so that's step 1, right? Is like, where are we today? What are the business lines? What do they cost us? Do they bring in any revenue? That's step 1. And then step 2 in developing the plans is saying, okay, we're trying to provide all these services. Where are we not providing services? Like, where are we just falling down flat because we don't have enough resources? And then identifying, okay, what do we actually need to just provide the services we're trying to provide the community today, right? Like an example would be, let's use planning's always a great example. Planning's goal is to have, let's say, the applications, development applications through the process. I'm making up these numbers, so don't tie these to them. Our goal is to get it through in 14 days, okay? But let's say due to staffing, we know we can't get it done for 30 days. So we're not meeting our current service level demand. So then they identified, what do we need in terms of staffing to just meet the service demands we're seeing today? And then we cost that out. And then the next level is, okay, what are we not even doing that we should be doing? Like, what business lines exist that would really help our community? Recreation's a great example, right? We're not even doing that. So what does that cost us? So we have kind of 3 different, you have status quo, what should we be doing? Or what would it take to do what we're trying to do today? And then what do we really want to do and what does that cost? So that's what our 3-year operational plans look at. And what we did in our budget process for this most recent year is we took each operational plan, reviewed them, and then made a recommendation on what needs to get addressed first, and then fund that. And then all of those needs, compiled, all the needs we have, roll up into the financial roadmap, right? So our number that we identified of revenue we need is based on all of that data that we collected from each one of our departments. So it's quite a process. It took us about 6 months to go through it, to have all that data, but it's really going to help us make sure that we have the resources we need in the future. So thanks for letting me talk about that for a while.
John, good question. Another question? Okay.
Yeah.
John, and then we're going to do Ray.
Just a quick one too. This will be kind of dovetail off what you just spoke of. So you get into the planning stage of kind of like, we're not doing this. This is what we want to do. Where do we come up with the funds to make this happen? One of the pitfalls that happens obviously in the budgeting plan for, say, a 3-year plan. We've all done this in our business, right? You don't know what you don't know when you're making that 3-year plan, right? So things come up, things change. One of the pitfalls then is sometimes, I heard consultants and engineers and architects being used for planning and zoning, all that kind of stuff. That's great. However, this is we're asking an outside entity to tell us what we should do in the place we're living in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, so how do we try to internalize that? And I realize too, we're kind of the bigger, half brother, whatever, to Portland, where we probably give a lot more than we receive in that sense.
Yep.
And so how do we balance that, right? How do we balance that, our controlled growth, knowing that we're sort of tied to Portland, but then also we're our own entity as well?
Yeah, so it's like 3 questions, I think. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with I love them. They're all great questions. I'm going to start with the first one. Yeah, so there's always a challenge, especially in local government, because our community, the issues the community is facing continues to evolve and change, right? And the demands that our community rightfully puts on us for services we're providing continues to change. So that's why we also have the critical issues bucket under our city budget as well. It's important that we have these foundational 3-year plans and we make space for the emergent issues that pop up, right? And things just change and we have to be flexible. And what we have now that we won't have long term that has been helpful is that access to those ARPA funds. The use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds have been so critical in the last few years to funding the most urgent needs that we have as a community, but those aren't going to be around forever. And so it's really important that we build up our fund balance, because our fund balance should be our reserves. If you don't know what fund balance is, should be the resource that we have as a community and as a council for when we have an emergency and we need to fund something, here's where we go. Unfortunately, it's really low because we don't have enough money. So we really don't have anything to turn to. And the other challenge we've had is when we go through our budget process, the first thing we start with, of course, is, well, how much money do we have, right? What does the revenue projection look like for the next year? It's always a starting point. And of course, the needs that we have greatly outweigh the revenue, right? So you're always, right now, where we're at, we're walking back. And what we're able to fund for this fiscal year is the most urgent things. So of all those 3-year operational plans that identified all these gaps that we need to fund, we were only able to fund, I think it was 10 in total of our whole organization. So it's really challenging within our current financial environment to invest in the things that aren't emergent, right? So it's hard to invest in the long-term needs that we have that really would make a positive impact on our community, because we literally can just fund we're just gonna drop one more staff person here and hope that it's like masking tape is basically what we're doing. Yeah, stopgap. So, okay, part 2 was the use of consultants. So what we use consultants for is to provide best practices from other communities and cities, right? A lot of cities do what we do, which is nice. It's really handy that we have other organizations that we can turn to and say, well, how are you solving this problem, right? So our consultants do bring different perspectives on how to do things, so that we don't continue to do things the way we've always done. That's not our job, right? We should be always evolving and changing and improving. That's our job as local government. So they will bring that perspective. It's important, I think, in our projects when we use consultants, they bring the technical expertise and best practice expertise, but what they don't bring, that's our job, is the community perspective, right? And that's what our council brings as well. They're the eyes and ears. They know what's happening in our community. That's their job. Definitely not the consultant's job to say, your community thinks this. They're there just to provide technical expertise that we might not have. So if we don't have a certain type of engineer on staff, they provide that gap, or best practice. So that's typically how we use our consultants. Like the fire standards of cover is a good example. We don't have capacity to do some of the analysis that they're doing they're doing this interesting mapping technique. We don't know how to do that. So they're helping us with that kind of data analysis that we just don't have capacity for. So I think it's a good question, and it's important that we're not having consultants speak for our community or make decisions. At the end of the day, the consultant could give us a report and we could say, thank you, we completely disagree with that, right? We can do that. That's an option we have. We usually find value in at least some of what we get from our consultants, if not all. And then part 3 was, trying to remember, 3 was, we are part of Multnomah County. We're the younger brother or younger sister to Portland. What are the dynamics? I think it's an interesting place to be in. And I will say what happens in Portland 100% affects us, right? There's not like a hard line and things just suddenly change when you're in Gresham. So what happens in Portland absolutely affects us. So it is important to us that we continue to have a relationship with Portland, and we're part of Multnomah County, right? We all pay taxes to Multnomah County, who should be providing us all with services. And so that's also, I think, an important area. So I always say, always pay attention to elections, because it's not just your local city council that makes a difference. It's also your Multnomah County commissioners who make a very big difference in your day-to-day lives. There's a lot of things the county does that we don't do, right? One example is the City and County Joint Office of Homelessness. We have our own homeless services team, right, that does the outreach on a day-to-day basis. We don't build shelters as a city. That is the responsibility of the Joint Office of Homelessness, right? We literally don't do that. The county does that. So it's an important dynamic and conversation. I think that even though we're part of a big ecosystem, we're still a city, right? Home rule. We do still make a lot of decisions for ourselves. So I still do think we determine what our destiny looks like. And we continue to do what's best for our community. So that's my summary. All 3 questions. Did I get them, Alja?
You addressed them.
I addressed them, okay.
So my last name is Snodgrass. My next door neighbor is McCammon. We share a property line. We're not related. So I just wanted to be that we share the area, but we're not related. We're not cousins. we're not stepbrothers. We're not any of those. So before somebody else said it, I thought I would say it nicely. So Ray, one of the newest chamber members, welcome
Yay.
aboard, and you're brave enough to ask a question.
I don't share your love for the city of Portland or Multnomah County.
Well, I didn't say I loved them. I just said we got to work with them.
Right. I was hoping you could help me look at, because you keep saying strategy, and I think it's kind of piggybacking on his question. I'm not sure I'm understanding the 25-year strategy for the city of Gresham. So 25 years from now is going to come regardless, time doesn't stop. And so it doesn't seem like it's that hard from a city manager perspective to get data that's out there, anticipate how many people will live here, what the demographics are going to look like, and then project how many officers you're going to need and develop a big picture strategy for how you will get from where you are now to here. And I'm not understanding what that vision is. And then part two is, in the interim, when you're under-resourced, what's the strategy from the officer's perspective, recognizing that you're understaffed? You know, you can only use the I'm understaffed excuse for so long as a city. You still have the problems. So are you using like a broken window strategy at the tactical and operational level to tell the officers, okay, it is what it is, so we're going to do broken windows and not let people jaywalk to set a tone that this is the way the city of Gresham approaches it? Or are we going to use our hands are in the air, blame it on the city strategy until 25 years from now when we hopefully have 1 per 3,000, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so the first part is using data and projections for our strategy. So that was part of the strategic plan development, was looking at trends, so whether that's population, crime, poverty, housing affordability. I mean, anything that you could essentially measure about what's happening in our community and what is projected to happen was part of the analysis of how we developed our strategic plan. Because it's important that what we have in our strategic plan in terms of vision and goals and where we're trying to go is not just a reflection of what the community wants right now, right? And what council wants right now, but also reflects, we know what the projections look like. We know how that our community is going to grow. We know what trends we're seeing. How do we make sure that the strategic plan addresses those specific things? So yeah, absolutely. That was a really key part of the strategic plan development. Council, I think, received like a 50-page packet of all the trends. There was a whole binder of all the trends and data that informed where we're going. So I would encourage you to check out our website and dig into the strategic plan to see kind of what we landed with. But there was a lot of data analysis behind the scenes to make that happen. When it comes to, we'll talk about police for a minute, because we do have our police organizational assessment review that's being presented tonight at our city council. And law enforcement is actually a complicated field. It might not look like it on the front of it, but it really is. And so the consulting firm named Barry Dunn, who did the analysis, did a lot of data analysis on our calls, where they are, when they're happening. Also did analysis on police officer time spent on calls, time not spent on calls, time spent on community engagement. So there's a lot of different data analytics that you can do on law enforcement, and particularly on police officers. And there are national standards and best practices. So they were able to take like essentially what's happened in our police department over the last few years and compare that to what are national best practices, national standards for what, you know, police officer percentage of time spent on various activities should be. There's a lot of standards. So they did a lot of work to identify that, and their recommendations that they're presenting are really based on that, right? What trends are we seeing? Where are we at today versus what the national standards are and what best practices are across the country? They also did an analysis of policies and procedures, which you probably know as local government, we rely on policies and procedures because we're accountable to each and every one of you every day. And so it's important that we have standards in place so that our staff know what's expected and what they'll be held to. And so we also did one of the recommendations from our or one of the areas of recommendations from the review too, speaks to policies and procedures that need to be updated. Again, need to be updated to meet best practices and to ensure that we're more efficient and effective. And now I'm forgetting the third part of the question.
The real question.
Oh, the broken windows. Okay. Yes, the understaffing. Yes. I hear you. Yes, we are understaffed. And yes, we also still need to do something, right? So what our police chief, who, if you haven't heard of him, Chief Goldberg, is a great guy. He was hired last year. He worked in the sheriff's office. He grew up in Gresham. Him and his team are doing a fabulous job of basically re-resourcing our entire police department team to ensure that we're addressing community crime and violence. So yes, to your question, we're not just continuing to do things we've always done. I'm like, throw our hands up and say, they are redeploying resources where possible and ensuring that we're spending time where we need to. And a good example is what we call enhanced patrol missions. We do them in conjunction with the sheriff's office, and we do them in areas where we either have seen a high amount of fatal or significant accident areas. We also do them in places where we've seen an increase in gunfire or an increase in homicides. And so they do these enhanced patrol missions where they stake out, and they've been able to recover a lot of stolen vehicles. We've made multiple arrests based on warrants that were out for arrest, as well as seized guns. So that's just an example of how our chief and his team have redeployed resources to try to address the most critical and urgent needs that we have as a community. And we still need more staff.
Okay, Gordon has a question. Somebody else have a question after Gordon?
I have to stand up. I know you're out of questions. So I've got a couple statements, questions,
Okay.
information. It's kind of my three-legged stool.
Okay.
It's kind of for the group. I went to Centennial High School. I've lived in the Gresham Barlow School District since the 60s. So a long time. And so my three-legged stool is really kind of accountability, information or education, and safety. And Ray just touched on this as part of the safety thing. And to me, you don't have any bigger responsibility than the safety of the people in this room. You don't. Because who does the chief of police report to? Specifically, that's my first question.
Oh, that was a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it was a question. There was a who in there.
Yeah.
So who does the chief of police report to?
He reports to our deputy city manager, Corey Falls.
So he's an appointed person, Corey Falls is, to that position.
Yes, he was
Wasn't
hired.
voted into office. Okay.
No, sorry, I'm also not appointed.
Right.
So
You're not appointed or are appointed?
I am hired by the city council, and all of our city staff are then hired. Like, for example, the police chief was formally hired by our deputy city manager, though I was involved in the process. So all of our city staff, including the deputy city manager, are hired.
So our police chief reports to Corey Falls. No, and I understand. I got it. I got it. Because everybody here wants to go back to work. I mean, everybody here owns a business or is an employee of a business or significant tied to a business. And safety and accountability in our businesses is everything, all right? How safe of an environment are we in? And then what's the accountability for that safety that we're involved in? So our police chief is reporting to a person that's been appointed to this position. And how long has he been working with the chief of police in that position to get their contract done and taken care of? I was under the impression he's been working on this since October, almost a year. And we've got no resolution today. Now, I think we're really close today. But since this person was assigned to work with the chief of police, and the chief of police reports to him, we're 10 months in. And our police department is a mess. We've got people leaving left and right. We are about 40% of the national average per 1,000 people for police officers. And we've got huge data analytics that we've just heard about that tell us that we really know that. And my question is, on the accountability side, how is it that this person has taken a year? This is a guy that's making over $200,000 a year working for the city of Gresham plus benefits. You can do the math on it. And he, in a year, has not been able to come up with a contract. How close are we to that today, based on its the current events.
So you're going to have to specify what contract you're talking
The
about.
contract to get the police to be a little happier with that the city recognizes them. The most current contract you're working on with the police union.
There's several. So,
Just take the most current one, the most important one.
okay. I'm sorry. I think you have some bad information. We have three. I think I understand what you're referring to. It's probably the collective bargaining agreement. Is that the right contract that you're speaking? I'm guessing.
that would be it,
That'd be
yeah.
it. Okay. So as a city, we have three unions. We have Teamsters, International Association of Firefighters, and Gresham Police Officers Association. Of the three, Teamsters is by far our largest. That's all of our public works employees, like wastewater, stormwater, sewer. All three have collective bargaining agreements with the city that all expired at the same time this year. So a lot going on at the same time. So all three were worked on in the same period of time. It's important to us, and the way we approach it is to make sure that we have a contract that's fair to our employees and a contract that's fair to the taxpayers.
So
That's
what's
the way-
taking a year for
I'm
the
still-
police one?
I'm not done.
Just
I'm not
talking
done.
about police really is what we're,
Can you let me finish, please?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
sorry.
So that's the way, it's fair to the employees and it's fair to our taxpayers. Because any increase or incentive we're giving in our contracts will be felt by our taxpayers, right? And you're the ones paying for it. So that's my job. I have to look at both sides, right? That's my responsibility as city manager, because I'm responsible for the financial operations of the city. So we look at both, and that's the approach we take. And we always look at so we have state mandated comparables. We can't pick what comparables we use in our contracts. The state mandates which cities we compare against, which is an interesting Oregon situation that we have here in our state. So we began bargaining with all three unions in this year, not last year. All three started in this year. Two are complete and one is still in the works.
And that's the police one? The police one is still in the works?
It's essentially complete.
It's essentially
Yeah.
complete? Okay.
Teamsters is not complete.
So does it seem appropriate then that 10 months and having the mass exodus of police, is this seem normal to you from where you stand and all the analytics you've looked at, that Gresham is just kind of a normal city in the time to study analytics and figure it out how to give them the best contract?
Sure, I can talk about collective bargaining. Collective bargaining does take several months to go through. There's a contract with each unit. We as a city get to determine what articles in the contract that we want to open up for negotiation, and then of course the association gets to determine what articles of the contract they would like to open up for negotiation. And sometimes there's some articles that we just don't end up opening up at all. So in the event that both parties want to open up and discuss many articles in the contracts, it is typical that it takes many months to work through them. On some of the articles, for example, compensation, we always open up compensation, right, to talk about. That could take one whole meeting just on one article when we have maybe 20 or 15 articles that we have to go through. So we try to get them done in as quick of a manner as possible, but we also know it's important to be thorough. These are multi-year contracts. And like I said, there's a lot of articles that both we want to open up and the union wants to open up. And our calendar is as much dictated by the union as it is by us. They get to set who they're going to have at the table. And if their people are unavailable for a month and we have to wait, then they get to make that determination. We will wait as the city. So that's also something to keep in mind, is the calendar is not dictated necessarily by the city's representatives, whoever they may be. They're just as easily dictated by what the union wants the calendar to look like and what the union wants to be the recurrence of meetings to be. So it is typically a fairly lengthy process when you're talking about a 3-year contract with a union, yeah.
Educated guess, when do you think the most important contract you're working on with the police department will be completed and will be moving forward?
Yeah, our goal is to have all 3 contracts to council in September for approval. That's
In
the last
September?
step. The last step in
Excellent.
approval is for them to go to be ratified by our city council in September.
And my
few
last little comment from one of the things you said it is an election year. And,
Yes.
and I so appreciate you bringing that up, because it is an election year. And we all look at it and say, how did we get here? All right? And why are we here? And what are we doing about it? Well, here's what we're not doing about it. Or we can do about it better. We're not voting well. All right? So if you like how things are, maintain the voting to keep things the way they are. Encourage the right people to get into those positions that keep us safe, that make businesses want to come here. I'm sure a lot of you have talked about maybe we should move our business out of Gresham when we're not going towards Portland. They're not our sister city. So think about it. The education part of this is we've got people making a lot of money running our city, especially tied to the police department. I'm just kind of narrowly focused on that I think that we need to keep them held accountable. And just like we do in our business, we get the wrong person in the wrong job, we retrain them, we move them around, or we let them go. And hopefully we do a good job when we hire them. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a question here. Thank you, Gordon. And thanks for the answers, Nina.
Yeah.
I don't know you.
I'm Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. Good to meet you. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah, no problem. So I got one. I just want to
Yeah.
tap on the mass exodus is not really per city blame. I do a lot of work with the other police departments all throughout the state. I'd say it's a bigger issue than what you might see it as. So to kind of back, the contracts with the unions do kind of affect the overall, but at the same time, it's a little bit more intricate than that. Is the easiest way to put it. A lot of people are leaving because of other issues that are not being handled. That is besides the point from the union contract negotiations. So on that, my question to you. So with the safety side of the city, you guys are using consultants.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a shortage on the law enforcement side. It's with every big city right now. What about reaching out to other organizations or businesses like, say, private security? Are you guys looking at unions? Because there's private security unions, there's also private security organizations. Are you guys utilizing those skills?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, there are opportunities to partner with other law enforcement agencies as well as private. So yes, that is one of the things that Chief and his staff are working on is examining what are all of our options as we continue to deal with staffing shortages. So absolutely, that's one of the things him and his team are handling and looking into. Thank you. Lynn's going to kick me off, so.
Well, actually, we have time, and this is a compliment to you. We have time for more questions, but we don't have time for more answers because your answers have been so long and so detailed. So, but in fairness, we are a couple of minutes before we're supposed to close down. Is there anybody who hasn't asked a question that would like to ask one last question? No? Nina, you've done a wonderful job. We really appreciate you being here today with us, and we look forward to tonight at the City Council meeting. You can come and get more details tonight at the City Council meeting about all of the strategy things that she put on the slide. Are you going to have slides tonight, or just get and go? Okay. All right.
Thank you all.
Can we give
Appreciate
her a warm round of applause, please?
Thank you.
Turn that off. Okay. Okay, lots of information. And I'm sure she'll stick around a little bit if you have any other questions for her. But again, you can come tonight and get the full meal deal. John, you may have some questions. Ray, you still had some, so be sure and have them answered before she leaves. I want to thank our sponsors again: Columbia Bank, Portland General Electric, Persimmon Country Club, the Boeing Company. Thank you, Amy, again for coming as presenting sponsors, and Gresham Barlow School District. Gresham Barlow School District, we got a really good report this morning about how school's going to start, and I think you're going to love it. Maskless, and I mean, we're gonna do so good. And Metro East Community Media, thank you, Keith, for all of this. Don't forget to get the rebroadcast in case you missed anything. With that, I'm gonna go home and do dishes in my new dishwasher. Thank you. Go forth and do good and make a profit.